Hello and welcome to the Show Up Dad. This is a podcast for hardworking fathers looking to level up their fathering skills and be more than just a paycheck or provider for their home. Today, I'd like to welcome none other than the woman who sparked the change in me, the love of my life, and the why behind the Show Up Dad, Jennie Mendonca. Welcome to the Show Up Dad, babe. I know living with me has not been easy, but thank you for being patient in my transformation. Can you go ahead and give us your version of what happened leading up to December 25th, 2018?
Thanks for having me, honey. So excited about all this. So to start our story off, at that time, you were working in El Paso. It had been about 3 years that you were out there as a foreman, journeyman lineman. And I was here at the home with the kids. I always like to say that I was dating my husband at the time because we only saw you on the weekends. And so I made a decision to focus on the goals that I could control. And one of the goals that I wanted to accomplish was to run a marathon. So I started to train, and I was outside running like 2 hours a day, 6 miles a day, every day. When I started to feel really sick and tired, I thought that I was overtraining, and then the headaches started and things like that. December 25th rolls around, and I ended up in the emergency room because I was very dizzy and I couldn't feel my hands and legs. There was a lot of problems. I thought I was having a heart attack. My heart was racing. And I told you, I gotta go to the hospital. And you're like, what do you mean? I was like, you need to stay here with the kids. I need to go. Something's really wrong. I just knew something was wrong. And the months leading up to that point, I was preparing the children without knowing what was really going on with me. I started giving them instructions if anything bad had happened to me while you were gone out of town, and where they could go and who they could go to for help. So deep down inside, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. That night in the emergency room, they had done a ton of tests on me, blood tests, EKGs, heart scans, all different things. Then they decided to put an IV. And at that time, my heart rate dropped so low. One doctor told me that my heart stopped. Others told me that it went down to like 15 beats per minute. I was conscious through the whole thing. I remember feeling all the life leaving my arms and hands and just moving inwards towards my body, that feeling just overcoming my body. And then they called you to tell you that they had to resuscitate me. And then from there, we just kept having hospital visits and things. And New Year's Eve rolls around. The same symptoms came up, but I was getting worse. And I just remember thinking, I'm not going to go back to the emergency room because they don't have answers for me. And I laid in the bed and I cried out to God, Lord, spare me for my children. And he spoke into my spirit and told me what was wrong with me. And I took it to heart and I started to research, and he gave me a green light on which doctor to ask for a specific test. And sure enough, that test, which is almost impossible to get a positive on, and especially within our region, came back as positive for Lyme disease. And it started a journey of me needing you home, you getting fired from your job at that point in time, and us just really relying on God to provide for every single thing that we needed. And just now we're 2 years into that healing journey. And when I look back, it feels really surreal.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's almost like it was you kind of ask yourself, did that really happen?
Right.
You know,
Yeah. When you experience a near death experience like that, it's all kind of a blur just how bad things got.
mhm.
And then to the place that we're at now, and going from almost dying and becoming allergic to everything because of the treatment that I was under, and not being able to eat foods and all different things like that, and thinking that I was going to starve to death every single day, to now living a full thriving life with
Mhm.
you home all the time now. It's such a trend, like such a contrast, the differences in what we experienced.
Hmm. No, I agree with you 100%. I wanted to ask you, Jenny, how has that traumatic incident affected you today?
I would definitely say when you go through something like that, for me specifically, life became precious, and it became kind of urgent for me to want to live, having experienced such a traumatic experience, almost dying and losing everything. Um, and now there's such an appreciation for small things. When I see like my children being able to eat whatever they want and stuff,
Hmm.
I get very excited about that, because it's truly a wonderful gift to have choice and to have freedom.
Hmm. Yeah, I do. I remember one of the, few times we'd go out to eat because, obviously when you have kids, when you live out of town like we do, they get hungry. So I remember going to a restaurant and sitting down eating, and we're about to eat a burger, and I remember you just looking over and just having tears in your eyes, just like staring at us as we eat. You know what I mean? And I just thought to myself, man, how horrible. Here we are, indulging in this and taking, you know what I mean, indulging in this liberty that we have to eat whatever we want. And here's a person who I love who's literally starving to death, not being able to eat, and she's watching us eat. So after that, we started to make it apparent not to really go out at all with you. You know what I mean? So that affected us, because the kids were used to going out. They're used to, hey, daddy, where are we going to eat? That was like our treat for us as our family. You know what I mean? And you know, when we had to stop that, I mean, it really kind of affected everybody. The
It
kid started asking questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely was like um, a bonding experience that we treated our family to. When we would go out to eat, that was something the entire family loved, and food brought us together. And during that time, because of the treatment that I had undertaken, and the effects on my body, um, it was so scary. Food became something that was scary, and to overcome that the way that I did through the treatment of neuroplasticity, like training your brain, um, is really, it's an incredible thing to be back to where we can join in on that as a family and enjoy food. And I tell you what, I love food. I've always loved food, and that's one of the things we always shared in our relationship. And now I'm a little heavier than I usually am, but man, I'm really enjoying it.
Mhm.
Whereas before, like, um, I think I was much more critical of my own body, and now I really have an appreciation for that extra layer.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and I totally enjoy the extra layer, me. But so with that being said, Jenny, Can you elaborate a little bit more about neuroplasticity and the lengths that you went to achieve, this victory in being able to overcome, your cognitive thinking of how you had become allergic to foods and stuff like that? Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened, in order for people to really understand, is I was on like 7 different types of antibiotics and antifungals all at the same time, which caused something in me called mast cell activation, which is where the mast cells, which are the first line of defense in your body when it comes to infections and stuff, kind of went haywire and decided that everything that was being placed in my body or was touching my body and stuff was harmful to me because I was so overburdened with this infection. So not only did I become allergic to foods and makeup and everyday household products, it was also pollens and things like that. So when my doctor told me about this incredible program called Annie Hopper's DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining System, I kind of did a lot of research on it because it's like no medication. All it is just like focused thinking.
Mhm.
And we bought the program believing that it would heal me because there were so many great testimonies about it. And so what I had to do was a lot of work. I was very dedicated because I knew God was leading me down the right path
Mhm.
and that I would ultimately receive my full healing. And so I had to trigger myself with the things that I was allergic to, and then go into some physical exercises with a lot of mental visualizations of myself as a healthy person, remembering past um, memories of me eating food and just rebuilding reassociations with the food in a positive way, and then seeing myself in the future eating the foods that I love and really just indulging in that vision. And so I think it's taught me so much about how to think positive
Mhm.
and how much what we think about truly affects not only our lives but our physiology.
No, I agree. We had a past guest on here, Andy Marr, and he touched base a little bit about that, about rewiring your brain and stuff like that, and neuroplasticity. And you are what you think. That's a biblical term. You know what I mean? A man is what he thinks in his heart, believes in his heart. So that's pretty awesome that you're able to utilize that. And we saw the fruit of that. You know what I mean? All that hard work you did to get back to the woman you used to be, and,
Right.
and I actually like to say a better version of yourself. You know what I mean?
I hope a better version. Definitely you do change and transform through trials.
Hmm.
And that's the goal, right? Is to become the better version. It was a lot of work. It took a full year of an hour a day, if not more, of visualizations. But I think it's really given me great tools to be able to cope with other traumas too.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, talking about traumas, Jenny, our topic is being a line wife. Okay. We know that's not an easy thing to do, and I just want to commemorate and just my hat off to each and every one of those line wives who, you know, hold the fort down, so to speak, for the linemen like me who go out there and provide for their families. You guys do an amazing job, and I don't think you guys get enough credit. Um, so I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, how did being on the road affect your family dynamic?
Well, when you were on the road, there was a lot of shifts that had to happen.
Hmm.
You were still the head of household, but not present a lot of the time. So my job became both our jobs
Hmm.
when you weren't here. But I also had to ensure that I was fulfilling your vision of the family too at the same time. So Like we had to kind of really just adjust life in a major way and choose what was important at the time. You were out of town, so I had to ensure that the kids were first and put myself to the side
Mhm.
for a time to ensure that we were moving forward to our vision of what our family should be.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Definitely, I had to take care of business and be very independent. It strengthened me in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
That strength doesn't necessarily come in an easy way. There was definitely times of loneliness and frustration having to raise children on my own for a good part of the week. I
Mhm.
mean, you would come home on the weekends, which was always so exciting to have you home, but it was always bittersweet because we knew you'd have to leave too.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's hard to adjust too, just from my perspective. It's hard to adjust. And we've talked about this before. I'd come home and I would, spend so much time with the guys or whatever, doing my thing, working, you know, amounts of loneliness as well, and when I'd come home, I didn't know how to really fit into the family's role that I had. For me, it was very hard to adjust because all week I had been a certain way. And then when I got home, it was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. I didn't know how to fit because when you're home, you're holding down the fort. You were taking two roles that you were never meant to carry, and you're doing the best. You know what I mean? You're doing the best that you could. And when I got in, you had a different set of rules, a different set of lack of work. I have a lack of words on this. A different set of priorities, that were going on at the house and stuff, and how the kid structure was and everything like that. And when I came home, I thought it was supposed to be a certain way too. So we kind of butted heads a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think even like not only did you have a difficult time like adjusting to our schedule, but when you would get home, I couldn't get the things done that I would normally do
Mm-hmm.
in my daily routine and things like that because you were here and we wanted you here, but at the same time, it disrupted everything. The
Mm-hmm.
whole dynamic of the family was not smooth sailing. And you're absolutely right. I was carrying the role of both of us here at the house while you're absent. And I was failing in a lot of ways. We have a lot of property and a small farm and things like that. And when you would come home, you would see the areas I was failing on the yard and stuff because my priority was for our daughter at the time and our children at the time and maintaining um, that love bond and not placing yard work and stuff as a main priority.
Yeah, yeah. And I see that too, and that robbed for me so much because I'd come home and I would see, where, I wouldn't say failing, but where there was upkeep that was needed in the
Mhm,
yard and, just in the house, you know what I
mhm.
mean? And having property takes a lot of work. So when I'd come home, I couldn't even really relax because I was so bombarded and overwhelmed with just looking and seeing, whether it be my property, my orchard grass, dying, or a broken sprinkler, or in the irrigation, or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? I saw that and I'm like, okay, I got to get this fixed because I'm going to be leaving again on Sunday. So that really robbed from my family time that I had with you guys to just kind of just unwind and spend time with you guys. And I see that now. I know hindsight's 2020, but that's the whole point of this show is to see where we've gone wrong and make the adjustments, the shifts that we need to do to become the better versions of ourselves, right?
Right. Yeah, you were definitely wound up. It was mind blowing to me your work ethic because you would work so hard at your job. You would drive 3, 4 hours to come home, and then you would take on these insane projects where you you would go to the mountains and you know, get a permit to cut down latias so that way our entire acre would have a 14-foot coyote fence all the way around it. And you would never leave a project undone. And it was hard to keep up with your drive sometimes. I think I was on the other side of the spectrum, which, you know, in all reality, we balance each other out because we need somebody to pull us in the other direction. But I was on the other side of the spectrum where I was home alone all the time, just me and Dakota, my daughter, and I mean our daughter, and I didn't really have anybody to push me around, to not push me around, but to motivate me to do things. Um, so when you would get home, I would just be like, oh my gosh, he's working so hard.
This
So
dude's over the top, huh?
you wouldn't even eat. I recall like I would have to go outside and remind you, like, did you eat breakfast? Did you eat lunch? Because you wouldn't even eat. You were just like a machine.
Dude, I don't even think I'd even drink water.
I know. I would have to take you a bottle of water. I would have to remind you to come inside, and you wouldn't. It didn't matter the weather. It did not matter how cold, if it was windy, whatever. I would be like, oh well, it's too windy. You can't be doing stuff outside today. You didn't care. You were just like a machine. Just work, work, work.
Yeah, no, it definitely had a deeper issues there where I was trying to mask the pain that I felt from being on the road and knowing that I was destroying my family, knowing that I was losing hold of you guys. I felt it, but I didn't know how to convey that into words or even into like a feeling or anything. I didn't know what was going on. I felt something was going on, but I didn't know what was going on. So in order to mask that pain, I dove into work.
Mm-hmm.
I kept myself busy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's strange because I think during those times of you being out of town, and it was always like we would have several year stretches where you're out of town and then you'd come home for a couple of years and then it would happen again. But we both experienced so much loneliness. And then when we would come together, it was difficult to enjoy each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of sometimes magnified the loneliness that we felt.
Yeah, because we're growing into two different people,
right?
I believe. You know what I mean? And it was kind of hard to to me, I'd liken it to a newlywed couple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you move in together, whatever, you're freshly married, you have this great chemistry and stuff like that. But then after the sparks or whatever, it's like, okay, this person kind of bugs me. You know what I mean?
Go over there.
Yeah, go away or whatever. You know what I mean? You really snore horribly or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you start growing apart from each other because of that absence. You start having that void. And you start growing apart instead of growing together the way it was intended to be.
Right. Well, like Jimmy Evans says, a marriage is like two rivers that have come together. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, when those rivers come together, the trajectory of the current hitting each other creates rapids. And we can choose to like flow together. Mm-hmm. in the same direction and become one with one vision, one goal. But if you don't do that, the rapids continue throughout the river because there's two currents going in two different directions. And when they collide, it creates that white water.
I like that. I haven't heard that yet. That's actually pretty good. Jennie, I wanted to ask you, okay, we talked about, how me being on the road affected our family dynamic. What obstacles did you have to overcome being alone?
I think the biggest obstacle was definitely being alone, um, mentally and physically.
Mm,
Um, I just remember, like, if my battery died or I got like a flat tire,
mhm,
um, and family didn't live close enough to help, I usually had to figure it out. And those are hard realities.
mhm.
Excuse me. Those are hard realities to have to overcome. I remember you having to call
Yeah.
friends that you knew that were linemen that worked here at home to maybe possibly come and help me at times. And just having to face yourself. Being alone really causes you to face yourself. And so um, there was a lot of things that were brought up,
Mhm,
and just having the desire and just having a different vision, like thinking that you're supposed to be further along in your life, like in your own personal goals, and not reaching those things
mhm,
because you're kind of putting things on hold because the family means more to you than anything else.
mhm,
Like those, you know, I really had to deal with a lot of stuff in my own mind,
mhm,
with overcoming being alone. So
mhm, mhm. Now, I wanted to ask you, babe, how did your upbringing add to this?
so definitely, my dad had well, my parents got divorced when I was around 8 years old, and I saw my dad on the weekends regularly. Um, Kind of a lot like how our relationship worked,
Mhm,
you know. Um, but then he moved away to Florida to go to school. And then after that, he moved to Mexico
mhm,
for some time. And so I think the fear of abandonment,
mhm,
the pattern was so similar
mhm,
of just seeing you on the weekends. It was really terrifying to kind of face that. And I never saw the connection
mhm, mhm,
until later, you would kind of bring it up to me that maybe there was a connection there.
mhm,
And it's only recently, I think, that starting to really see how that relationship of what my dad built in me
mhm,
really affected us, because there were huge amounts of insecurity and fear of being alone and not protected and things like that. And then the dynamic of our marriage and you being out of town all the time just kind of made that a reality.
mhm,
And having to face that was difficult. So I think definitely my dad's actions paved the way for those insecurities to be
mhm,
alone and to be unprotected.
mhm. Yeah, it seems like my actions and what I had to do, in order to provide for my family definitely magnified the underlying issues that you had with the fear and rejection and abandonment you faced from your own child.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm seeing now a lot with a lot of people today. You know what I mean? In a healthy marriage, in a marriage designed the way it's supposed to be, I believe that our spouse is there to really magnify the problems that we don't want to deal with. So, and that again comes off as them being a nag, or it causes a lot of fights and tensions in marriages because you're like, well, whatever she's doing is upsetting me, or whatever he's doing is upsetting me. But deep down inside, I think people get upset because they recognize something in the other person that they don't like in themselves.
Mhm. I definitely think that what you're saying is very true. And when you really think about it, we are drawn to the similar characteristics in people that our parents displayed.
Mm,
And then when we're married to those people or we're committed to those people, those very same characteristics are the very things that we sometimes hated too as a child,
mhm,
growing up. And it's kind of like a sandpaper,
mhm,
right? That
mhm,
just kind of, we can allow it to like rub us raw, or we can allow it to smooth our edges, I
mm,
think. So it is like we do have to look and see and ask ourselves, like, why is this bothering me
mhm.
and how does it relate to me, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I like to call it the process.
Yeah.
A lineman friend of mine, who I spent a lot of time with, he always told me, Dave, you got to see the small details,
Mhm.
don't get that tunnel vision, see the small details and sit back and enjoy the process. Let it,
Mhm.
let it flow,
Mhm.
in your life. And I definitely see hindsight 2020 how everything that we've gone through has helped us to become a better version of
Mhm.
ourselves, and even just with the loneliness and abandonment you felt from me, it really helped you to really face stuff that you had, possibly really pushed down inside of you, some hurts, you know what I mean, that your father had caused, you know what I mean?
I agree. When you're young and you don't realize what your parents' actions are really doing to you, uh, you kind of develop like coping mechanisms in your life and patterns that serve you. And then when you get older, those coping patterns don't really work in marriage,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you have to like reevaluate and readjust and grow and change and be adaptable. And it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a difficult process, I think, sometimes whenever we have to face those hard things. And being alone here as a line wife, which I'm sure most wives that are of linemen, traveling linemen, would agree. Sometimes it can be excruciating
Mm-hmm.
to be alone.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't even imagine. As men, we never think about that. We just think that, hey, we're going out to provide, you know, and we're going to provide this lavish life for our families. One of the things that I remember you telling me was, I don't care about a house. I don't care about cars or fancy stuff. All I want is my husband.
Yeah. And that's really how I felt, because you would always say, I'm doing all these things to make this house nice for you. And to me, it wasn't a home unless you were here sharing it with me and we were building it together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that's really what I wanted. That's really what I craved, was our connection,
Mm-hmm.
not all the things that filled space in our lives or kept us occupied. I wanted you.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes we're so out of it, focused on the next job and stuff like that, that we just think we can suffice our absence by just throwing money at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here, I'll just do this, or we'll go out to eat, or I'll buy this or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm gonna put a wraparound porch around the house, or
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, whatever. So yeah, no, I could definitely see that, and it's the hard truth. You know what I mean? That set you free. So.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I look at our house now and I'm definitely grateful, because something so incredible about you is that you'd always say, you would see like an issue with the house or the yard, and you would say, babe, what do you want to do here? Like, what do you see that we can do here? And then I would tell you my vision of what I would like done in our home or in our yard. And then you would make it happen. You would build it. You would rally the family together and we would build it.
Mhm. Yeah, I know it's crazy. Even being out of town, we'd still do some stuff. I remember all the time.
Yeah.
Remember that time when I had my foreman truck and I was coming back from working in Texas, and there was all that rock that they had, and I literally would just fill up the back of the foreman truck and I would bring the rock home because it was a real pretty rock. And I'd bring it home and I'd have, some of my linemen or the apprentices loaded up in the back of my truck. And I'd bring it home on the weekends and, I'd start going to build stuff with the family.
It was always that drive, like always. You were just so driven. I had never met another person so driven. There was never a project that would not get finished. Like it would be finished in like 2 weekends, whether it meant us filling wheelbarrows up with dirt and like leveling out our yard by hand, or or pulling like trees out of the forest with permits. And you would get permits for everything, and we would go and just like, I don't know, every single rock in our yard we handpicked.
Yeah, it's definitely that driven gene that I think all linemen share. And
Yeah.
if we don't have a happy balance, it can actually cause a lot of disorder and destruction in our families. I think it's all about balance and finding that balance.
It is, especially, well, because like you guys have that drive for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's truly special. And linemen are unique.
Mm-hmm.
They're a unique group of people, and their families are unique. I don't know if there's many groups of people out there that are relatable to that, other than maybe military and people that have to travel regularly. Maybe there are. I don't know. I just know that linemen are really unique, and you guys are special with your drive. So yeah, balance can help with that drive, I think. Being focused.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Jenny, I wanted to ask you, you touched the base with, a little bit about your father. How do you see, looking back, how did he really influence your life, do you think?
Well, my dad is he's a very smart man.
Mm-hmm.
And we always spent so much time talking. And it's interesting because when I think back now, like he used to like to go on drives. And that's something that you really like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad is a very extreme personality as well, which I think it definitely shaped my my like desires in a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I grew up in a household where my parents were divorced and I only saw my dad on the weekends, he influenced me greatly. The way that he would speak to me, the way that we would have conversations, the way he dealt with conflict, all of that, his extreme personality, all of it really shaped me. Even just having a little bit of time with him, it wasn't no moment with him was not burned into who I am today. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think that he really paved my future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Looking back, Jenny, we talked about loneliness now, and how that affects a lot of wives that are, their husbands have to travel, right? So you talked about self-reflection during that time. What did you learn about that? What did you learn about yourself? during that time?
Oh man, being alone is really hard. Um, and I really chose to look at myself, even though I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I would say I had the most spiritual growth in those lonely years.
Mm-hmm.
They were difficult because I'm a very social person, and I love people. And it was always just me and Dakota here by
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And I loved being with my daughter, but it was difficult to have. You can't have like an adult conversation with your 5-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least you shouldn't, because they don't understand what's going on. And I just really chose to face it. I realized that I had expectations, and that's where most of my disappointments came from.
Mm-hmm.
I had expectations to have a life in my thinking, like, that was very different than what I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And I coped with all of it by going to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I just dove really deep into the church community because that's what really helped.
Mm-hmm.
I started developing great relationships with pastors and working at the church and all kinds of things in order to just make sure that I was understanding what was going on with myself. And being alone really caused me to have to look really deep at past trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful that I was surrounded with a community that wanted good for me,
Yeah.
because I was able to overcome a lot of that past trauma.
Mm-hmm. I could see how choosing people around you that were, positive, really, really was a good idea. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't here, and it could have went the other way, where you could have gotten with people who didn't have your best interest in their mind, and they could have taken advantage of a lonely girl,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. I don't know how I made that decision. I know it was all God. He had his hand on our family. But yeah, I definitely could have been leaving my daughter with my mom
Mm-hmm.
and partying while you were out of town.
Mm-hmm.
But I chose to seek church
Mm-hmm.
and to seek what was wrong in me instead. The question always came up in my head is, what's going on with me that I allowed this to be taking place in my life? And I wanted to know why, and I wanted to fix it.
Wow, that's a pretty good question. I mean, that everybody should ask themselves, why am I allowing this? What's wrong with me that I allow this to happen?
Right.
That's a deep question, Jenny.
We sorry, I know that we're gonna we kind of have to know our own value in order for others to value ourselves, value us.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like when I was alone, I would feel all those things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Wow. I once heard a man say, Jenny, that when your dreams become your spouse's nightmares, it is time to reevaluate the dream. How did we reevaluate our dream?
We were forced to, I think, with me getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most one of the trickiest things about having a spouse that's out of town is wanting to know the timeline. And during that time, I wanted to know the timeline of how long you were going to be out of town.
Mm-hmm.
But things were going good. Like it was a great position and there was a lot of perks to it. So when I got sick, we were forced into reevaluating our situation. And God really had his hand on it. When I got sick, he provided for you to be home, and we had to change our whole way of life.
Mhm.
You no longer could work out of town. We had to have you here with the kids.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways that kind of forced you to have to look at yourself too.
Mhm.
And we were really forced to come together and have to be together
Mhm.
and to work as a family and to be a family again.
Yeah, no, definitely. Me looking back now, I see where that was my catalyst for change. Me coming home and just seeing how the kids had become estranged from me, and seeing how our family dynamic had changed so much, and just to really see how much I was missing in their lives, and how much of an integral part that I played in their lives as well, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that was definitely the catalyst for change. So it was definitely something that needed to happen. I'm not saying the sickness or anything like that, but I think that actually helped our family dynamic, and that was the shift that we needed to go forward, because I don't think we could have continued to go down the path that we were doing, because I think I'd still be where I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was already kind of in a place where I believed that with you being gone so much, you were teaching me how to live without you.
Hmm.
And so my mentality was to pursue independence. If I couldn't have you, then I needed to be strong and to be independent. And that was starting to move me away from the marriage and away from those types of things.
Hmm.
So I don't think that getting sick was God's will,
Hmm.
but I know that God will use all things together for good for those who love him. And he utilized that to bring our families together.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. I wanted to ask you a hard question, Jenny. What positive changes have you seen in me?
um, there's been so many. Uh, you're a fighter. And anytime that I've ever pushed and pushed and pushed for you to change, uh, you fight me, but at the same time, you make those changes. You adjust.
Hmm.
And and I would say recently, the effort that you're putting towards being the father that you visualize yourself as is huge. One of the huge things that I complained about was that we needed to make some changes in your career, either find a utility out of state or something where we could move to and all be together as a family, or you find something new and different. And you you started looking for other options. And I've always seen that you were a leader and that you were meant for so much more, that God really had a calling on your life. And I had always told you, stop messing around with all this stuff that's like just occupying your time, because God has like these great things for you.
Hmm.
And you have finally really stepped into that and pursued his vision for your life.
Hmm.
And that's how we're here today on this podcast, because now you've always been a man that loved God,
Hmm.
but now you're really pursuing what he has for you. You're pursuing after him in this really amazing way. And you just are always striving to be better.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I thank you for that, Jenny. I really do. I mean, just to hear affirmations like that from your wife, you know what I mean? It's just, it does so much for a man. Um, there's a saying that Sir John Templeton always says, and it goes like this. It says, self-improvement comes mainly from trying to help others. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to improve myself by just helping others through this podcast, through the amazing guests that we have on here, to bringing awareness to certain subjects that, for lack of better words, no one wants to talk about, but it's plaguing men. I think men have gotten a real bad rap, especially fathers. And I want to try to change that perspective that society has given us.
Mhm.
We are more than just a paycheck and a provider for their home. And I'm trying to ignite that fire for father engagement. And if we can do that by having listeners come on here and share their stories like we've had, or getting professional speakers on here to kind of influence us and drop some good wisdom to these fathers on there, then you know what I mean? That's what we're doing.
Mhm.
And that's where my heart is. This trade gave me an opportunity, even though it was rough and it was hard on our family and stuff like that. It definitely gave me an opportunity. I mean, my story. I couldn't really get any other job because I was a felon, and I lost jobs from that, even though I had a degree. And this trade really opened up the doors for me to create a life for us.
Mhm.
But there was a balance that I needed to find. There was deeper issues that I needed to fix and face in order to find that balance.
Right. And I definitely agree, like what you're saying, you're trying to ignite the fire for father engagement, but ultimately that will result in a more fulfilling life because men can just grind and grind and grind and just be focused on work and things like that.
Mhm.
But the fulfillment comes in the love that they receive from their family and being celebrated.
Mm.
Right. So that way you don't feel that you're just a paycheck as well. You don't just feel like you work and work and work and that's all your life is.
Mhm.
Like there's so much more to life. And you igniting this fire for father engagement, I think opens doors for so many possibilities of the men that every man visualizes themselves to be.
Mm. Mm. Well, thank you, honey. I really appreciate that. What areas do you see that I still need work on?
Oh man, is this a trick question? I'm just kidding. So I would definitely say words.
Mhm.
Uh, you come from a trade that is real rough and words fly around, on the line and while you guys work and you guys are around heavy equipment. So there's yelling and things like that. Um, and when you come home, sometimes you are still at work when you're dealing with your kids. And I would definitely say just the words,
Mhm.
being more conscientious of which words you choose and choosing words that build.
Hmm. Hmm. I'll definitely take that to heart and I'll continue to work on that. It's an area that I struggle with.
Yeah.
um, definitely, can't be walking around the house, dropping F bombs or anything like that. So, no, I believe once you become aware of, these things that need to make change, you need to make changes in, what I mean? That's definitely leaves your mind open to start changing and going through that process to bring more clarity to it and why you do these things and to receive healing ultimately in that area.
Mhm.
How can wives hold their husbands accountable in a positive way?
And so I think it's so important. Everybody needs somebody that holds them accountable,
Mm-hmm.
But wives definitely, line wives, you know, like I said, we're so unique in all that we have to hold up while our husbands do such a dangerous job. I can definitely say to hold them accountable in a respectful manner. You need to definitely help them reground themselves when they can't balance things in their lives, and doing so is not saying, you know what, you're all screwed up, like your priorities are all messed up, and never talk down to your husband. You have always told me, David, that when you speak to the jerk, you're going to get the jerk, but if you speak to the man, you will get the man.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tried. I didn't always do well at this, but I would try to build you up with a better vision
Mm-hmm.
rather than tear your actions down.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know I need to work at that still, but holding you accountable to a higher vision because I respect you,
Mm-hmm.
rather than despising you for your actions, but just doing it that way,
Mm-hmm.
rather than um, having contempt for you.
Mm. Yeah, no, and you've done an awesome job. I got to say, I always talk about this one scenario that was a catalyst for me to change from me drinking. I
Mhm.
was in the military. I drunk all over the world and everything else, and I brought that into line work. Having to cope with a lot of the issues that we had during the day or whatever. And with that being said, I always talk about that scenario where I was throwing miniatures over the fence and the neighbor brought the bucket and his 5 gallon bucket, and he's like, "Are these yours?"
Mhm.
And it was the miniatures that I drank, Maker's Mark. I used to love Maker's Mark and Shinerbach. So I remember you talking to me and saying, I'm not gonna heckle you about the situation. I'm not gonna harass you. I'm not gonna do anything. But if you are okay with your daughter growing up being accustomed to the smell that you're producing, you know what I mean, from the alcohol, then I'll leave you alone. If you're okay with her growing up and seeking that in another man, a mate, and being okay with that smell, then you know I will not bring this up again. And when you hit me with that word, I mean, I tell you what, I had tried to stop drinking several times. I had a cycle where I'd go from drinking to chewing, chewing to drinking, vice versa. And I never broke that cycle until that day where you told me those kind but straightforward words, and I just got to commend you on that, because if you would have told me a different way, I would have probably been drinking. I would have probably killed myself already in a DUI or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because it had gotten to that point where it was bad. And I just want to thank you for being able to drop that wisdom on me and speaking to me with respect that you did, and not, for lack of better words, just bombarding me with all these negative thoughts and saying you're a piece of crap, or you're a drunk or anything like that. You know what I mean? You spoke the truth in love,
Mhm.
and I gotta give my hat off to you for that.
I give my hat off to you because you've been sober for such a long time now. What, like 10 years? You
Mm-hmm.
you took that and you never looked back. You never went back. Uh, and sometimes we do go back, but it's always a new day the next day, and we can make better choices the next day. And I just it was always so important to me because I saw how great a man you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that one day you would walk in that. Um, and I just had a lot of guidance from a lot of wise women.
Mm-hmm.
on how to help build that vision in you through the words that I spoke to you.
Hmm. Well, thank you. I truly, truly appreciate that, babe. Now, I wanted to ask you, well, actually, I wanted to tell you this quote I heard. Okay. It says, whatever direction the husband leads in, good or bad, that is direction the family will follow. That being said, our leadership roles are crucial in the development and survival of our families. You have seen the good and the bad. What qualities do a husband need to lead their family and lead well?
I definitely think that when a husband is level-headed,
Mm-hmm.
so everything I always take is from the Bible because I really feel like God knows best.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks a lot about how a husband is to love their wives like Christ loved the church. And and love is really all about leading in a way that is protective. It is kind of in a servitude way
Mm-hmm.
where you where a husband should be thinking about the needs of his family
Mm-hmm.
before his own desires. Um, I think we see a lot in our society today where people anesthetize their pain with hobbies and desires and things like that because they don't know how else to deal with it. But when we stop focusing on numbing that pain
Mm-hmm.
and we start focusing on serving others, the pain disappears, and then we're able to lead in a loving way when we take our children and put them first, when we take our wives and we put them first, and we consider their needs above our own desires. I think that makes a great leader for a household.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and communication is a big part of that. And communication isn't a two-way street. I mean, it's a two-way street. I'm sorry. It is a two-way street, but there's two parts to it. You need to be able to speak well and to speak in love, but also with authority. And you also need to listen well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when a leader can listen to what the followers or their family needs or is saying
Mm-hmm.
and wants to be heard, to be cared for, then people want to follow,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, no, I agree. John Maxwell had an awesome quote where he said that people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care.
Mhm.
And I think that plays majorly in leadership because even with our families, you know what I mean? My daughter's dynamic with me. She doesn't really listen to me until she knows that I care about her. I
Mhm.
care about her well being. I care about her thoughts,
Mhm.
her dreams, her desires.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, she definitely it's easy to see it in children because they just are like, well, whatever, and they're so pronounced in their characteristics on how in their behavior on how they deal with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But with her, like, it's so apparent, like you can go in there and lecture her all day long and she won't hear anything that you have to say or even respect anything you have to say until she's able to talk to you and say what she feels. And when you listen to her, I can see her open up to you. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the moments that she opens up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had a past guest on here. I don't know if you remember Stephen Poulter, and he talked about that daughters actually need relationship before they need structure.
Mhm.
And that holds true. I mean,
Mhm.
I see it in her, and it's so evident in everything that we do with her. And
Mhm.
you know what I mean? I'm once again just so grateful that I've been able to have guests like him on here on the show to share with our audience, you know. Jennie, that's a wrap. So I just want to thank you once again for coming on here and just sharing your story with our listeners and the why behind the Show Up Dad. And you know, I just know that this is going to be a tremendous blessing to a lot of line wives out there, you know, tradesmen wives who, you know, go through the similar things that you've gone through,
Mhm.
you know. So I just want to thank you for coming on here.
Thank you for having me. It's been really amazing and so exciting to see this journey take off. And yeah, it's definitely all for the families out there. I know that linemen aren't the only ones that travel. There's men that go on oil rigs and firefighters and all different things where, careers that keep them separated from their families. So I know that a lot of people experience these things in life. And I just want to tell you all that um, there's hope. You just got to find out what works with your individual situation if you feel like you're in a place that is difficult. So thank you so much for having me. And we just wish the best for all the families out there.
Absolutely. And one last thing before we get off the air here, I just want to just say condolences real quick to a good friend of mine who just passed away, Jack Gonzalez, good friend. You know, he was a lineman for, I believe, 30 plus years, and you know, he lost his life on the line, you know, yesterday. So you know, just condolence to his family and everybody that knew him, who anybody who's having a hard time, you know, with his passing. You know what I mean? Jack was an awesome dude, and he was loved by a lot. So I just want to say, you know, Jack, you know, it was an awesome time knowing you, brother. God bless. Thank you. And once again, you know, this podcast is brought to you by the Show Up Dad Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization igniting the fire for father engagement. You guys take care. God bless.